we say puppets, we think of Kathputli. Though Kathputli is only one type of puppet which comes from Rajasthan. You cannot call the puppet from Bengal Kathputli or from Andhra Pradesh Kathputli. But in Hindi, we do not have another word. We just say Kathputli. There are many Latin, French, poupée, or a figure, or a doll. And then it comes into the language as puppet. 30 years ago, everyone would say marionette. And they wouldn't say puppet easily. Today it's only puppet, because puppet encompasses many styles or techniques of puppetry. While as marionette today has become like Kathputli, only one type of string puppet. The word actually marionette is also interesting. It comes from a religious term. It comes from Christian tradition, the creche, the figures on the creche, the small figures in Central Europe which use small figures for the during Christmas for the nativity scenes. They were moved. And from there it comes, and it was marionette. In Italian, it was a little Mary. Mary became Mario, and nette means small. And from that, the word marionette came, about figures which were moved. That is actually the essence of puppetry. Puppetry is something that you give life to, something that is controlled, as we said, something that is inanimate, which becomes animate. Well, it's changed a lot. It's mostly human movement. I would say a puppeteer right now is a human being, but today you have even gone into electronics and other things, and it's called animatronics. Animation and electronics. And these are some of the science fiction pictures that you see, your dinosaurs, even your Ninja Turtles, the eyes moving, things like that. Those are done by cables or through whatever. But at the end of the line, there is still a human being. So even there he's pressing a button or pulling something, he becomes the puppeteer eventually. To the fact also that we have puppets for film and television which are doing lip sync, and the thing is, I don't know how it works, but the camera and things are focused onto the human being, and that transfers the movement onto the mechanical figure. So if I'm moving my lips in a certain way, that will control the puppet. But eventually again it comes back to zero, neutral, where there is a human being at the end of the line, whether it's a string puppet, which is worked from above, whether it's a glove puppet, which is worked on the hand, whether it's a rod puppet, which is worked by rods from either below or from the back, or it's a shadow puppet. Shadow puppets are also in some ways precursor to animation film, because two-dimensional animation film, which was shot frame by frame, is almost the moving or the live version of shadow puppets, I would say. And in most traditions all over the world, you have some sort of puppetry. In certain countries you don't, but generally in most countries you have traditional puppetry, and some have extremely modern techniques as well. We always used to say animate, inanimate. This was the normal thing. That means an inanimate object given life becomes a puppet. But there's a German puppeteer, Roser, who put it very nicely. He said the puppet is like a vessel in which for those 15 minutes the puppeteer as well as the audience puts their emotions. Only then it becomes alive. Because otherwise it's just one-sided. If I'm keeping on moving the puppet and your imagination is not there that it's moving, it won't. So when both come into the puppet very well, then it becomes alive. This term is in some ways called willing suspension of disbelief. Matlab ki aap willingly you go into a make-believe world, even though you know I'm working the figure, you know that it's not working on its own, that it has no life of its own, but if it's worked well, it becomes alive. The response which comes from the audience to a puppet or to a figure, to what is made, is what baggage we carry. We grow up with all sorts of what we call today baggage, in the sense the certain colors. Why do you like a color? Because I like it, because this says this to me or that says that to me. Emotions, whatever. So all that is baggage that we carry, and that is what the puppet sometimes evokes. If you see this bag, take it away from the person who's using it, right? It's just see it as an object in a different light. The color, the material it's made of, the form it has got. If this bag is put next to this bag, immediately the characters will be very clear. Okay? because of the size, because of the way it's made, because of the form, because of the structure, whatever, color also plays a very important part, immediately a story is formed in your minds. Who is this? Who is this? It can be anything. It can be big brother, small brother, big man, soft person, whatever. But what I'm trying to say is that the puppet or an object always speaks. And that is not just making the object, but what it's made of, the color. If this bag has to be given some movement, now animation of bringing it alive, I don't know, it's a soft bag, it's a small bag, how would it walk? Okay? Okay, it could run. It could be sloppy also. Okay? If this bag, what would the movement be? What would it be? Would it be strong? Would it be soft? What would the movement be? These are the essences of puppetry. The shoe obviously has character because of the person who's wearing it, whatever, feminine, male shoe, whatever. Now, if you put the two together, it forms a story. Immediately, we call it juxtaposition. When one thing by itself is a little, one thing by itself, but as soon as the two come together, it forms a story. Now, I'll do a very small improvisation with these shoes. Pretend I am not here, that I am not seen. Okay, now watch. Okay. Okay. But puppet theatre does sometimes score a little more than sometimes live theatre. At times, not always, but at times. It gets across faster sometimes because of its objective nature. Difference between puppetry and live is objective, subjective. If an actor is acting on stage, you are seeing yourself in flesh and blood. You are seeing the same. While an objective, you can say more things very often through the puppet theatre than you can say with live theatre. And this experience I have had, this experience comes right through World War II, when during occupation in Europe, many of the puppet characters today are heroes. They're in museums as puppet heroes because they kept the language of the oppressed country or the country which was taken over alive underground. And the dictator could not attack the puppet, because the puppet is a doll. If it would be stupid if he stopped that. And so it became a very strong thing. In 1976, I was in Ahmedabad at ISRO, and we had the satellite TV educational experiment site. And we were doing the work in Nadia, PEJ transmission. It was in site. And there was no television at that time, community viewing, there was no TV, there was nothing. So even the language of film had to be easily, done, because everybody could understand flashback, flash forward. This is 76. And they had the live theatre, the serials, they had musical program, and then you had the puppet program. Whatever could not be said through the actors' theatre was said through the puppet theatre. And we had two characters. One was a donkey, Gada, which was the puppet, which was the alter ego, and Mukhi, which was the human being, a character played by Kailash Pandya, and a very famous Bhawai actor who did the voice for the donkey. And these two would meet every week at one spot, and they would argue, and they would come up through the argument about a real incident that had happened in the area. Donkey could criticize religion, could criticize all sorts of things because he was a donkey, because he was said he could not have brains, but he was brainier, plus he was a puppet. The first 3-4 programs, the reaction was, ye to gada hai, why are you trying to fool us? This is not a real donkey, real donkeys don't speak. These were the reactions. But after that, the donkey became the voice. Today there are one or two channels who are making puppets only for TV, but up to now what has happened is we've been just recording stage puppet theatre for TV, and it's totally different. All over the world, traditional puppet theatre, even modern puppet theatre, is associated or is connected to the social milieu around it. So whether it's today the epics, Ramayana, Mahabharata or Yatra theatre, anywhere in the world, wherever there is puppet theatre, it is always connected with the folk theatre of that area, always. And if you see the Rajasthani puppet, you will know that it's coming from Rajasthan, but the music, the way it's used, whatever. If you see something from Andhra Pradesh or from Karnataka, you will know where it's coming from. And 90% you will also find a relation with the live theatre of that area. The most obvious ones are, for instance, the rod puppets of Bengal. They're called Danger Putul. Dang as in lakdi, as in chadi. They worked with rods, and Putul. Danger Putul and Yatra theatre of Bengal is connected. You have the Yakshagana Gombiata or Yakshagana puppet theatre of Karnataka and Yakshagana theatre form. You have Pava Kathakali, Pava as in doll, small, Kathakali, and you have the Kathakali dance theatre. These are all interestingly connected, in fact visually connected also. They look very similar as well. If you go to other countries, in Japan you would have the Bunraku theatre and the Kabuki, Bunraku puppet form and the Kabuki theatre. In each country you will find this connection. Very often when one disappears or has a problem, and in this case the theatre form, then the puppeteer always relies on the most strong folk theatre, and that becomes in India the commercial cinema. That then becomes the yardstick, and whether we like it or not, whatever, then the puppeteer starts, the traditional puppeteer starts taking from that to connect the audience. And this is very clear because you get it in the music, you get it in the way costumes are made, you get dialogues, you get even puppets. Puppet we only know Kathputli. But there is so much more in the different styles of puppet theatre. Now the first puppet obviously is it's Tarer Putul as we call it. It's a string puppet, you don't see the strings the way it's been hung, and it comes from Bengal. It's about 2 feet high, and the material of this puppet is shola pith. Now this is the one that is the most seen all over here, Kathputli, Kath ki Putli. Each puppeteer, whether traditional or modern, puts something of himself in the art form. If that is not there, it will become a museum piece. So whenever we say कि ये बदल गया है, the traditional is lost, or this is gone, yes it is, but then that is how it is staying alive. And that is how the puppeteer keeps it. Even today, 20 years ago, what you saw of Kathputli is not the same, or even 15 years ago is not the same of the Kathputli what you are seeing today. The original Rajasthani Kathputli story was Amar Singh Rathod. It was about Amar Singh Rathod and his exploits. And in between came all the trick items, horse rider, Ganarkali, ye wo, jo Dhobi, Dhoban, all these little characters which came into the story. In fact, even the historical fact of Amar Singh, they have mixed up. This tradition is almost extinct. It comes from UP, Gulabu and Sitabu, 2 characters, glove puppets. They're made of papier-mâché. But what is interesting is that in all glove puppet traditions in India, the puppeteer does not hide. The puppeteer is seen with the puppets, while in all Western traditions, the puppeteer of the glove puppeteer hides. And he also plays a character with the puppets. These are all rod puppets from Bengal. They're about 2.5, 3 feet. They have a rod, and the strings go inside the body. So when you pull the string, the hands move. And the rod is fixed to a socket on your waist. You can see the head of the puppeteer at the bottom, from the second puppet from the right. You'll see the size of the puppet. Yeah, they call themselves opera companies, in fact. Here you will see backstage, because there's a puppeteer with the puppet, there's a whole orchestra. There are about 14 to 20 people normally in a Danger Putul group which perform. So you notice the cloth has changed, there's some sort of a terraline or a terracotta bani material put on. Today what is happening is that due to television, film, whatever, there's one look of beauty that is coming in, whatever the concept or the look is. Earlier you could make out where the puppet was coming from by the material which was being used, but today that is slowly disappearing because of this whole thing of monoculture. And this is a look which is, if you will find this sometimes in Tamil Nadu, you will find this is in Bengal, you will find it somewhere else as well. These are Bener Putul as they're called, they're glove puppets from Bengal, And again, in this tradition, the puppeteer sits in full view of the audience, and he can hold an audience with two of his puppets. He can just improvise with things, and he will connect things. Bener Putul has come, we do not know, but there are versions. It's come from Beni thing, because the cloth is long and it moves. The other thing is it turns around and they tie the hair thing onto it, but nobody has been clear why it's called Bener Putul. But they're glove puppets. Now these are a Bener Putul man making puppy mache, newer puppets, newer stories. These puppets are from Orissa. There's only one group, the old master is dead now, and they're called Ravan Chaya. They're shadow puppets. This thing is also almost extinct, Gopalila. These are the string puppets of Orissa, small wooden figures and string puppets, wood heads, wood bodies, wood hands. This is the only tradition in Maharashtra which is living in this Sawantwadi district. Pinguli is the village, and they do a small Ramayan with very small puppets, string puppets. So this is the whole stage, the booth. Now these are rather rare. You don't see these puppets again from Kamala Devi's collection. You will see they're all natural colors. The material, they're about this high. It's almost like an icon, one picture in a whole scene in one puppet, and the whole puppet moves across the screen. These puppets are about 80, 90 years old. Just have a look at the way the puppets are made. The profile and the front face is the same. They can use it. It's almost like a Picasso picture. These people, this is the original style. These come now slowly between Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, the Yakshagana, Bombiatas. And these are 3 generations, in fact, of Koga Kamat's group. The 3 puppets. The first one was grandfather, the Hanuman was made by his son, and then the figure at the back is made by his son. So they're the same family, the 3 puppets. Again from Tamil Nadu, these are string and rod puppets. The 3 strings on the head go to the ring on the head of the puppeteer. So when he moves his head, the puppet moves its head, and it has steel rods which are used on the hand. The only other place where steel rods come in puppetry are in Sicily and in small puppets in Czechoslovakia and Central Europe. And then you have smaller shadow puppets from Tamil Nadu. Again, you'll see the old and the new. The middle figure, Narasimha, is an older puppet. There's a blue and a pink one, Ram and Sita, which is a brand new puppet. Yes, Andhra shadow puppeteers stand and perform the larger. And you see the screen is always tilted a little bit, about 45 degrees. The audience would be on the other side. This is the rear portion. The light falls on the puppet. And the screen is slightly tilted because the puppets rest on the screen then. So they stay on the screen. Here you have the Pava Kathakali that I was talking about. Venu, G. Venu has, in fact, 1978 in Bangalore there was a conference. In fact, Kamala Devi was there at that point, and this style was extinct. There was no Pava Kathakali. There were a few heads available, and she got grants and she went around with Venu and museums, and they recreated the tradition. Again, you see they sit and perform in full view of the audience. These are the Tol Pava Kutu, the shadow puppets of Kerala. These figures all move. And then you come to what we normally see in most fairs, the Andhra shadow puppets. The larger, they are 5 to 6 feet tall, the largest shadow puppets in the world. That's how they would be working, the Andhra shadow puppeteers. They would be standing and working. Also, Andhra puppeteers, Andhra groups are the only groups I've noticed where the women also work puppets. In most of the other traditional puppeteers, the women would be narrating or giving the music or something. But in the Andhra tradition, women also work the puppet as also lead the group. Now we come slowly to the bridge in the 50s, 60s to modern theatre. This is Meher Contractor, late Meher Contractors. She did a whole thing from the Shahnama, Sorab and Rustam. But she used the shadow technique from Andhra and created these puppets. This was her version of the story of Ahmedabad. She had done with rod puppets. This was the puppet section at Darpana. In fact, in the modern puppetry, we have 2 schools in India. One comes from Kolkata and one from Ahmedabad. And Kolkata was influenced by the people who went to Russia, Moscow, and studied under Obratsov, and the ones from Ahmedabad from Hair Contractor. So there are two. That one became very technically perfect, and her versions were more creative and experimented with theme, with storyline. Calcutta Puppet Theatre, the puppets of the Ramayana. This is Hiren Bhattacharya, who's most of the puppet theatre, the contemporary puppet theatre, is pretty political in saying in Kolkata. Even this is about 25-30 years old. It's about the nexus between the soldier and religion. And the Pandit is blind and he has specs, and the soldier. Literacy House in Lucknow started a whole tradition of educational puppetry. Wealthy Fisher came. This is the Theosophical movement, and she came, and it's a sort of pre-post independence, started this whole thing of puppet theatre for education. They made puppets out of papier-mâché of that times, what was in America and Europe. And this is a tradition which is most modern puppeteers use, of paper pulp, making the heads of newspaper pulp with methi seeds as glue. This is something that I did when I first came to Delhi in 1980s at Sri Ram Center, where we were performing with different techniques, styles, mixing actors, puppets. Dhola Maru was a Rajasthani Gatha, and we did this whole enactment with large masks, with traditional Rajasthani puppeteers, with actors. While the actor is carving his puppet on stage, the narrator in fact, his traditional puppet, he starts singing the story. This is Anurupa Roy, who lives in Delhi and works with tabletop puppets, solo narration stories, her story of Durga. And then she did a story about Ram. It's like love letters of Ram and Sita, and then the whole thing about Hanuman, and it's a whole thing where she works around the story. Now all these bigger figures that we make are carved from thermocol, because it makes it lighter, it's easier. It's not the nicest material, but it makes it easier to carry around. Contemporary shadow puppets made by Ajit, again from black paper. Husband and wife school teachers who make crushed paper, Pepsi cans, things like that, and little glove puppets for school shows. Meena Nayak, also in Bombay, who works with large masks. Also Meena Nayak's performance with school children. Puran Bhatt, who lives in Delhi, who's a Rajasthani puppeteer, but has also worked with a lot of modern work, and his version, a collaboration with a French puppeteer on The Little Mermaid. And he did a Dhola Maru where he got out of the traditional Rajasthani booths and used the whole stage, including the actors, but with Rajasthani puppet. And then he has a big show number which he does with puppeteers and dancers and things for festivals. In fact, a whole chorus line of puppet dancers. This is a workshop that I often do with young people, where we do rod puppets made from scrap, from objects, from bottles, from whatever's found, and we start creating figures. These were large figures outdoors, made all from baskets, and the soup, the sieves, and covered with paper. This is a project that we still do, it's going on, which is a collaboration between our group Ishara and Salam Balak Trust. 7 so-called, no longer street kids, are peer educators in HIV and substance abuse, drug abuse program, using puppets and characters. We've got about 5 or 6, 15, 20-minute stories which go to schools, bastis, colleges, NGOs use us, and it's like a catalyst for a discussion afterwards, yeah. When we're talking about gender issues, most of the puppets, we do not have faces, no male, female, we're just talking about figures, especially in the HIV context, because it's not easy to talk about things. If you go to a college, yes, but if you go to a school, it's not easy. And the whole performance, this play was called Chunauti, the challenge, and the boss of ignorance and the boss of awareness, and that's how it's a battle between the two. This is another thing that we've been working with a lot, large puppets, but using just baskets and leaving them. They're large processional figures for the outdoors, big rod puppet. This was a whole mix with the small, I like to play with scale in the puppet theatre, and Puran with his traditional puppeteer, the human being, and then this huge 12, 13-foot figure which is worked with 3 people. This we just did yesterday. This keeps going on and on. It's called Images of Truth, Satya Ki Pratiroop, on the ideology of Mahatma Gandhi. It's a non-verbal, without text, just in world music, but again talking about apartheid, these are some of the other larger figures that are used. A piece called Journeys, where the protagonist is a small puppet, and it goes through life, imagination, death, happiness, and then to the beyond. This is a piece with puppets which are fixed to the body with rods, and it was called Transposition. It's a story from Vetal Panchvinasati, or Bikram Vetal stories, and Thomas Mann's Transposed Heads. In fact, Thomas Mann got the story from India. He completed the story, and we did it more as a dance performance. the archetypes or the figures were puppets, and the inner voice or the dancers were there. So each character had a live person and a puppet person, and there was an interaction between the two or between others. You see how the puppet is moved. There's a person sticking to the puppet and it's fixed to the waist, and there are two rods. Puppet has always been the voice of the people, because in each tradition, everywhere around the world, you will have two characters, either the barber, Nai, or anybody else, who will bring the, whether it's a classic or it's a religious theme, whatever, to the present day, and will have the liberty to make fun. But in many cases, it has been what is happening in the court to the common people. Like Amar Singh Rathore, what were the exploits, what happened in the court to the common people. And in many cases that has been the thing, but then the puppeteer takes something from there and improvises. Now if you see the glove puppeteers, they will take on anything and any person. So it depends, really speaking, on the style, from where it's coming from. What the glove puppeteer does in Bengal, the glove puppeteer from UP or from Kerala will never do. It's also something to do with the background or the tradition or the social awareness that is in that place, or how it comes, which makes the puppeteer do. Even the modern puppeteer, the themes that he or she will use, most of them are urban based, the modern puppeteers, and they come from a theatre of art or dance or theatre or whatever. Their topics would be, in a sense, affecting, the social milieu around them, and they could be a little more heard voices. It's not always the case. Now, if you go to the traditional puppet theatre, if you go to the south, 90% of all the repertoire is from the epics, the Ramayana or Mahabharata. But within that, there's always been characters which have humor, sometimes even lewd humor in that, and that is allowed. It goes through, and the puppeteer then uses it to his whole benefit, or wants to say something about the place where he's performing, things like that. As in music or in theatre, if you're crossing boundaries or going from one country to another, there's definitely a link. Let me tell you about something that I'm sure there has to be. There is this story, or there is this research that has been done, that the puppeteers originally came from up Rajasthan area and went down south. And they have then transferred into, from string to shadow and things like that. Now, that hasn't been absolutely proved, but that is because of sometimes the language that is being used, or certain words that are being used. So some of the researchers have found that in Maharashtra, during, we were talking of the play Shivaji, but they were being used as spies. Also, the puppeteers were going from one place to the other as spies, and I do not know which form they were using, but that is what made them travel. And so there definitely has to be some link. But all over the world, you have a glove puppet or you have a string puppet. Now, whether it's the technique that then comes in, for instance, if you see jewelry in Rajasthan, which is made out of silver, and if you see jewelry done by the Vikings in the Nordic countries, you'll almost see the same look, except that's in gold, this is in silver. The process of that point, or the way the technique dictated the form, I don't know. Maybe that came up, or how it's used. You will see a link between the Kathputli tradition. In Uzbekistan, there is a tradition which is almost extinct, except in museums. You will see a puppet theatre in Iran, which is almost similar to the Rajasthani tradition. Even when we do our new work, we are influenced by many other art forms or things like that, and that is what makes it alive.